there's been a lot of talks, a lot of smoke around Stephon Gilmore to the Indianapolis Colts. He had a visit yesterday to Indianapolis. There's been some reports out. Right now, Derek, there's no deal in place, but it seems like both sides are very interested in each other. And we don't know what that contract's going to look like. Probably going to cost a hefty price. Jim Irsay talked about it a couple weeks ago about how the Colts could potentially be looking to add one more veteran guy. I know a lot of people talked about potentially the Honey Badger, but it seems like the Colts are moved off of that, and they signed Rodney McLeod. So they've got depth at safety now. So now the attention turns to Gilmore potentially as an Indianapolis Colt. I know, Derek, you did a quick video on him yesterday, but I thought we could talk a little bit more depth, kind of have a good conversation about this question. All right, so say the Indianapolis Colts bring in Stephon Gilmore on a 1 to 2 year deal, something along those lines. Would he potentially be the missing piece for this defense? Because the Colts lost a few guys in their secondary, specifically at the cornerback position. They obviously traded away Rock Ya-Sin, got Yannick Ngakoue out of that trade, and then also Xavier Rhodes, who has not re-signed at this point. It's kind of looking like that ship maybe has sailed as well. But if the Colts were able to get Stephon Gilmore on their roster as their true number one corner, would he potentially be the missing piece for this defense who showed some flashes last year, but they were very inconsistent at times, right? Could he potentially be the missing link here for this team, for this defense, to potentially take it up a notch and be one of the top defenses in the league? What are your thoughts, first off, on Stephon Gilmore as a player, and then the answer to that question?
Well, I mean, Stephon Gilmore as the player, I mean, it's no wonder he was one of the most highly regarded free agents in the entire market and still is. Even though he's getting up there in age, you still know that this guy, when he is healthy, he can play, and that's why the market value for him is still so high, because, when he is on the field, he is a very good corner despite his age and some of the other things that go into it. But in regards to the actual question, is he the missing link? I don't believe he's the missing link. But when you look at a guy like Stephon Gilmore, who is basically a more or less a man-to-man shutdown corner, that's something that the Colts have not really had since, dare I say, like Vontae Davis, like 5-6 years ago. I mean, it's been a while since the Colts had a guy, and Vontae never actually stayed that way for us for very long, but he had that one good season. I think it was 2016 or 17 or whatever. But either way, he had that one good year where he was shutting down everybody, and that's something that a Stephon Gilmore can do for you. Now, granted, again, he's on the back end of his career, and, he had injuries last year. Over the last 2 seasons, he's really kind of had a few injuries here and there. But, you and I were talking about it right beforehand that, the Colts still see him as a great high upside. The injury concern really doesn't seem to bother them a whole lot, at least not right now. And, again, if the Colts were to give him a contract, I would imagine they give him a lot of the contract up front. So that way, in case they decide to back out of it the next year, it wouldn't be harder for them. But again, just to be able, and especially since, you're going to have a bunch of young guys in there, Stephon would be, the veteran of the group, basically, because he'd be one of the oldest ones in there. But again, a guy that really knows his stuff, a guy that was in the same boat as Xavier Rhodes in 2017, you now get what Stephon Gilmore was in 2019. All pro, defensive player of the year, 6 interceptions, locked down everything. And Xavier Rhodes did a really good job coming in when we picked him up and filling that spot in on that one side in that zone coverage scheme. I just think now with a guy like Stephon Gilmore, who's physical, can play that man-to-man if you choose to go that route. It's really nice to see that kind of guy go in there. And even if he's not the same player that he was in 2019, you still think that even if the guy stays healthy, he's still better than most of the options you have out on the board right now.
Right. And also being able to work with Ron Miles, who has worked with a ton of guys, right? I think that could even help. It seems like the Colts typically, and I know they have a different defensive coaching staff, but they've been able to get the best out of players, right? Especially at DB. They've been able to get the best out of guys like, Isaiah Rodgers last year, Rocky Sen last year, even Kenny Moore, Corey Willis, Julian Blackman, all those guys. They've been able to get a lot out of them. So I think for me, yeah, it's just about getting him back to, that number one corner. Look, he only started in, I think, 3 games last year for the Panthers. It's kind of puzzling how they used him in kind of spot duty when he was only a couple years removed from being one of the best, if not the best corner in all of football. So I think, Derek, for me, you talked about the veteran presence. I think that'll go a long way, for a guy like Isaiah Rodgers, especially. And if you do draft another corner, maybe, in the mid to later rounds or something like that, I think that'll just go a long way. Kind of like what we were saying for the Xavier Rhodes, a guy that's been there, a guy that's done that. And especially a guy that was the defensive player of the year. Like Xavier Rhodes was a good corner, but he was never to that level that Stephon Gilmore has been. Let's be completely honest. And I still think he's got some left in the tank. I mean, he's only 31, will be 32, come September. So I think he still has a couple of years left.
Yeah.
To me, Derek, I could really see the Colts kind of doing a similar route to what they did with Justin Houston a couple of years ago. He's about the same age as Stephon Gilmore is now. They signed him to a 2-year deal. Like you said, front load that contract a ton. And then, if he is healthy, I do think the Colts feel like, and I think a lot of people feel like, he can still ball. He can still really help you out.
Yeah.
Even if it is like a 1-year rental kind of thing, you push back cornerback in, another year to address it long term, right?
Right.
At the worst. And, you get another year of Isaiah Rodgers growing. Maybe you draft a corner like I talked about. And also if Stephon Gilmore is injured, you still have some depth. Like Brandon Faison can still play ball for you. I mean, he did last year for the Raiders. So, but I think the cool thing is, Derek, that if you signed a Stephon Gilmore, every area of your defense, every phase, you have 3 phases, right? You have defensive line, you have a all-pro type of player in DeForest Buckner, you have a Pro Bowl guy in Yannick Ngakoue, you have Darius Leonard, who is an all-pro player, and then in your secondary, right now you have a Pro Bowler in Kenny Moore. He's really the only one that's really done much in terms of accolades at this point, right? But if you get an all-pro guy, I think for me, when I talk about missing piece, I think he is the missing piece for this defense because now you figured out pass rush. You got a pass rush, hopefully. You already know your linebackers. You know your safeties if Julian Blackman does come healthy, and you have Rodney McLeod for that very reason as well. You just don't have a number one corner right now. You don't. I mean, we can say potentially Isaiah Rodgers, potentially Brandon Faison, but you don't really have that legitimate guy right now. So I would look at it as a huge win if the Colts were able to get a stud pass rusher and then get a stud corner on top of that, right?
Yeah.
It's like they created a need for themselves when they traded away Rock, but then they fill it with Stephon Gilmore. It would just be a huge win for me. And you talk about that all chips in mantra. I mean, for the defensive side, this would be screaming that. The Colts feel like their defense is only a few key players away from potentially competing, and being legitimately a top
being with that top 5 to
10
10 defenses in the league, I mean, and if there was one guy at this point in the whole offseason that you were going to spend just a little bit extra just to try to see if it does set your defense over the edge, it's Stephon Gilmore. I mean, again, you and I think have slightly different opinions on missing piece sort of thing. As in, like, missing piece for you is more of the guy that's going to plug in right away, make the immediate impact. For me, I think of missing piece as, the piece that's going to set the defense over the edge, and it could be the long-term solution as well. But again, the only problem I have with Stephon Gilmore is the fact that he's played 19 games in the last 2 seasons. It's the only problem I have. Only one. I don't doubt his playing ability. I don't doubt his leadership. I don't doubt the player he is. I just doubt a little bit on the health problem. It's the only thing I have a problem with right now. But again, I love his play. I think he would definitely make this defense that much better right away. I mean, again, it would be great to have, even if he never gets back to that level again, still to have a guy that is still very well respected by any quarterback and deep and offensive minded coach in the NFL knows who the hell Stephon Gilmore is. So so that immediately gets teams guessing, and that alone is enough to say every Sunday you're going in with a little bit extra chip. Now you know you got a little extra chip there on the side that says, okay, they may try to go away from Stephon a little bit now. Now let's try to focus on getting Isaiah Rodgers in place and Kenny Moore in place. Let's try to work on those guys because we don't have to worry too much about Stephon. You don't have to worry about Stephon because Stephon knows what he's doing. He gets a little bit of time in to work with the scheme. That's not going to hurt. He's going to figure that out very quickly, but it's dealing with those other guys now because now you know they're going to try to attack Kenny Moore and Isaiah Rodgers and then being able to diverse a different scheme that way. So again,
Yep.
I love the idea. I don't see why so many people are so opposed to the idea of that. Maybe it's just the price tag. I don't know why. I mean, people were what? I don't know if people really do think that Stephon Gilmore is about to fall off the cliff altogether. I mean, guys, he played in 8 games last season and had 2 interceptions. I mean, he played in 11 games the year prior and only had 1. So, I mean, you know, Stephon Gilmore, when he's on the field, you know, he still balls. So,
and people don't throw it his way because they know the type of player he is.
Exactly. They tried to do that in 2019, and look at what happened to him. Ended up with 6 interceptions. So, again, I don't know how anyone can doubt this guy's ability. And I don't know how anyone can talk about price of all things when we are sitting at top of cap right now, and there's plenty of ways to make moves right here. I just think, if you want to make a big splash before the draft and you want to get the guy that's going to immediately set your team apart in some way, adding Stephon Gilmore could definitely be that thing.
And you don't even need you'd obviously love to have the defensive player of the year, Stephon Gilmore. But if he could replicate what Xavier Rhodes did a couple years ago, you'd sign up for that all day long, right? Yeah. You just need the guy that's a legitimate number one that could shut down number one receivers. Because look at the guys the Colts are going to play this season. I mean, that even shows you more how important it is that they get a guy like Stephon Gilmore who can line up against Devontae Adams of the world, the A.J. Browns of the world, those type of guys. I mean, that AFC West is just wild right now, and the Colts have a few decent receivers in their own division that they have to watch out for. So, it's going to be interesting. But you mentioned the draft. I think one thing that this move would do, Derek, is I think right now we can all agree wide receivers the number one need. But I think you could argue without Stephon Gilmore, this cornerback group, it's probably right there at number 2 or number 3 for need right now.
Mm-hmm.
So it would eliminate a need. You need to potentially, you only have 3 picks within the first 4 rounds this year. So picks are at a premium, especially this year. It would allow you, Derek, to really go all in on the offense in the draft. It really would. You could go wide receiver. You could figure out potentially left tackle. You could potentially draft a tight end. And you don't really have to touch the defense outside of maybe a few more depth signings at different positions. The defense, to me, if you sign Stephon Gilmore, contingent on him being healthy, of course, you don't have to touch that defense, really, in my opinion. You can focus all in on getting Matt Ryan protection, getting him weapons. And I think that's what you need to do. I think it makes a ton of sense from all those standpoints. It might cost a little bit, but you have the money. I mean, the guy that they just had with the next pick yesterday, and the capologist guy was saying, he said, you can manipulate the cap however you want. You can always make it work if you really want to make it work.
Yes. And it's just like, for the love of God, we've been saying it all off season, man. We've been saying it all off season for the Colts to do something with this cap situation. Just one move. This is it. This is the only one I'll ask. Any more the rest of the off season, I don't give a damn about. I would just like to have Stephon Gilmore. I've been saying it since February. I'm saying it now. I would love to have Stephon Gilmore on this roster. Again, don't think he's the long-term missing piece, but if you really think your defense is fringe top 10 and can really do some damage, adding a really good corner like Stephon Gilmore can really make it that much better.
Yeah. Were you surprised when you saw that the Colts actually hosted him on a visit and how interested they are based off of their really lack of activity outside of the couple trades?
I was a little surprised that Irsay sent the jet, to go and pick him up and, hosted him very much like they did. I mean, I definitely knew that they would be in touch with him. I mean, they'd be stupid not to, but I just kind of figured, there would have been something else to it by now. But I mean, I hope the reports are right that, things went really well with them. And I hope that, we get to see a deal done soon. I really hope.
Yeah, it seems like from what I've heard from Zach Kiefer and all that stuff, it seems like the Colts are determined to get a deal done. That's what all indications have said. Again, if it doesn't happen, don't blame me. Don't shoot the messenger. That's just what has been reported and what we're reporting on here.
Mhm.
So it seems like both sides are very interested, and it's funny because how quickly will all those people who say bargain bin Ballard, blah blah blah, will shut their mouths if the
Yeah, I
Colts
know.
make this move.
They're already. That's what I've seen. Some people in the comments say that same thing. I've literally seen people say that where it would be just another bargain move. Like, what do you mean? Like, what is it? Like, this is the chips in motto that y'all were grasping onto back in January for no reason whatsoever. But
It's so weird how like people have been conditioned now to tell themselves it won't happen. It won't happen. Like it's ridiculous. Actually, it's kind of sad a little bit because I'm like, can't you people just like get excited about something? Like this is exciting, man. Like to potentially get a legit shutdown corner. I know there's questions, but like it's exciting, man, because like you really are getting some really impact players on that defensive side this year. If you do bring him in, you're getting one of the top pass rushers and you're getting one of the top corners. And to me, that's huge, man. Those are some of your biggest needs this year. So I don't know. I'm just really excited about the potential of this happening. And it seems like this visit seems so different. You talked about the jet, right?
yeah,
It seems a little bit different than maybe some of the other visits. Like you don't typically pick up a guy in a private jet
yeah,
if you're
if you
not
ain't
intent
trying to
on
impress him a
talking.
little bit,
Exactly.
yeah, or say sending him in style, and Pat McAfee going on Twitter saying, "Hey, don't worry about this weather. It's normally 70 and sunny in Indianapolis
Mhm.
all year, all
Oh
summer
yeah.
long, so don't worry about that."
Well,
That
to
was
be
funny.
fair, the man played in Buffalo and New England, so he shouldn't be
Yeah,
complaining
he
about that.
doesn't he wouldn't complain. Yeah, he's been in some pretty cold places, so yeah, I don't think that'll be a problem for him. And I'm sure they probably mentioned that. Oh yeah, we're in a dome, by the way, so you don't about 70% of the year you don't have to worry about playing outside. So
Yeah, exactly, exactly. But all right, guys. Well, that'll do it for our conversation around Stephon Gilmore. Is he the missing piece for Indianapolis? Obviously, not the long term, but is he a short term piece? I think he is. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. That'll do it for this one, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. Obviously, keep it here. We'll keep you updated if/when a deal does happen with Stephon Gilmore. Crossing our fingers that it does, because that would be a huge addition to this team. But thank you guys so much for tuning in. And as always, guys, go Colts.